Here's an introduction to using the LabQuest2s. These little data collection computers will hook up a number of different data collection devices, different probes to them in labs this year. You might be familiar with these from chemistry or physics or science. They're slightly different than the ones that were used in 9th grade physics, but we'll get to know them here with this little podcast. First thing to know is that on the face of these, each one of them has is named. This one happens to be Willie. And you can ask me about any of these first names, but they each have a first name. This happens to be named after one of the greatest singer-songwriters in the history of music, the one and only Willie Nelson. Here's some basics to start with, and you can just take a look at getting used to the face of the LabQuests. Some of the things that are a little bit more common to us, of course, the power button on the side. If you don't know about power buttons, they're used to turn things on and off. There. But there's a number of little indicators that are always at the bottom here from you tap this, it would be the home screen, and it would get you to the screen on the previous page here. This lets you know the status or how good of a signal you're getting if you're using GPS services. This one is an important one for us, the Wi-Fi status, battery level of course, and here's a home screen. Tapping this button is the same as tapping this on the touch screen. Will get you to the home screen. And of course this just backs you up, the escape button. Other than that, some of the other ones you probably won't use quite as much. We covered the home screen already. If you tap that, it gets you home. In this lighting, you don't see it as well, but there is a home button on the outside of the LabQuest as well. The most important ports that we will use and get to know are probably the analog ports. There's channel 1, 2, and 3. We can actually attach up to 3 probes here using those. Usually to be 1, but maybe 2 at the same time. And maybe throughout the trimester we might use a USB port or the digital ports, but most likely it will be the analog ports to become familiar with. And here are just some other of the buttons along the edge or the outside of the LabQuest to get familiar with. On this side, both here and you can see here, there are little plastic or rubber flaps or doors that cover those things up. So in the LabQuest app itself, there's five different screens, and across the top margin of this thing, it gives you those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different displays or screens that you can have access to when you actually are using the LabQuest to collect data. And a little bit later we'll talk about each one of these things individually, but when you first fire this thing up and plug something in, it has the ability to just start collecting data right away. And this is the screen, the meter screen, that will most likely pop up. And in here it will show you the type of data, depending on the probe that you're using, the type of data that you can collect. So worth noting, when you first fire these things up, if you just want to start collecting some data right away without a prescribed way to set everything up, you can do that pretty easily. The LabQuest app is going to launch right away, and as long as you connect something into channel 1 or into the analog ports, most likely is what we'll use, it'll default to start collecting data right away, depending on the probe. This happens to be obviously a temperature probe, but it will start collecting data right away, and you can get a reading immediately. In order to start collecting data, and usually we're talking about collecting data over an amount of time, the little green, looks like a play button, is down in the left-hand corner. Since this screenshot was taken when data was actually being collected, that little green button will turn into a stop button after you've actually pressed play and it's collecting data over time. So start with the green triangle and stop with the red square. Once you've pushed stop, what you can do is you can tap along this touch screen anywhere that you want to find a specific spot on your data collection line. You can notice that this is plotted out right there. You can get your, on the x-axis and the y-axis, you can get that point. But you can also use these little icons down here to move that bracketed line there along your curve. This one to move right, towards the right of the screen, obviously this one to move left. In order to analyze the data that you've actually collected, in a second you can probably maybe just push pause on this and read this. I don't need to read this information for you line by line, but it's just something to note that you can either analyze all of the data at once, or you can select just a portion of it, so you will only analyze data in this shaded portion. And the directions here, if you press pause here on the podcast, will walk you right through how to do that. Continued data analysis. This allows you to find a curve fit, best curve fit to your data collection. Again, you can just push pause and read through this for yourself. Once again, we're back to the LabQuest app, and remember that there were 5 different screens along the top here that you can tap on. We've got the meter screen, and here we've got the graph screen, which is this squiggly line. And again, for this time, you can probably just press pause and read how to use that, or each screen. A couple more of the screens in the LabQuest app. You've got the table screen to present your data in a table form, and the instructions screen right there, that little red notebook. We will sometimes use preloaded experiments in depending on the lab. And lastly, I don't have a separate slide for it, but using this icon, we won't need to use this very much because we'd be typically using iPads with little note-taking devices and Notability or whatever we might be using. So there's really no need to use the LabQuest for any freehand note-taking. This is an important screen or ability that you need to have using the LabQuest, is being able to adjust the data collection. Real simple, you tap on this little square right here, and it allows you to change any of these. We'll almost always have time-based, but you can change both the rate at which the samples are collected. Here it says 2 samples per second, and the duration is for how long the LabQuest will collect data. Here it would collect data, when you press start, it would collect data for 120.0 continuous seconds, and then after 120 or 180 seconds it would stop. But if you do tap on that, you can see here that this is where you can adjust any of those things. Just tap on them and a little keyboard will come up and you can adjust that number. Very cool with the LabQuests is the ability to connect them to your iPad. And so at the home screen, or at any time, you can click on this little Wi-Fi icon, or on the home screen click connections, and it'll get you to this little page on the LabQuest. This will tell you whether the Wi-Fi is on or off. Obviously we want it on if we want to connect to the iPad, and you can either scan this with the barcode reader of your iPad or actually type this address into Safari or whatever browser you're going to use, and this will get you a screen on your iPad that will show the data collection. And that way you can then screenshot that and throw it into a digital lab write-up or whatever you might even need to do, maybe even print it out. And lastly here, we always want to shut them down. It seems that they work best if you shut them down rather than just let them go to sleep. So we always want to shut them down and then plug them in back to the chargers in the room. But from the home screen, click this folder, the system, and the next screen will be this, and tappity tap tap on the shutdown. It may ask you if you need to save any data, and you probably don't. You can just shut them down and like an iPad or a phone, the machine will probably spin for a little bit, and then voila, it'll just shut down.